All right, strap in everybody, because today we're going deep on a story that really makes you wonder where ambition ends and deception begins.
You know, it's funny.
Can you tell a visionary from a con artist?
That's exactly what we're going to try and unpack today.
That's what we're here to do, right?
Yeah.
And the guy in the hot seat today is Anthony Gignac. This guy, he spent decades posing as a Saudi prince.
Wow.
And we did our homework for this one, folks. We went through Wikipedia, YouTube videos, news articles,
Legal documents.
even legal documents.
Oh, wow.
We're going deep to figure out, was he a grifter or was he gifted?
That's a great question. I think one of the most interesting things here is how much can charm and just like a made-up persona really get you?
Right.
And at what point does ambition turn into just straight-up criminal activity?
Yeah, because this guy's story is wild. We're talking about a journey from an orphan in Bogota, Colombia, adopted by a family in Michigan,
Right.
to living this super high-rolling life as supposedly a Saudi royal.
Yeah, but of course it was all built on lies.
All built on lies, exactly.
And I think that contrast, that kind of almost dissonance between the fantasy and the reality is what makes Gignac's story so interesting.
I agree with that. And you know what gets me is that this guy started so young.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Like really young. We're talking 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
He convinced a Mercedes dealership
No way.
to let him test drive a car. Who even thinks of that at 12?
Right, you're not even thinking about driving. That's incredible. I wonder if that early story kind of hints at some, like, natural charisma, some ability to kind of, like, influence people that was already kind of there. Like, maybe that's where it all started, you know?
Like the con artist origin story or something.
Totally.
Right? And then on top of that, think about the name he chose for this whole charade. He went with Prince Adnan Khashoggi.
Not just any name.
He didn't just pick any random name.
Yeah.
Prince Adnan Khashoggi was a real person, a Saudi arms dealer, somebody dripping with money and power.
Yeah, you chose that name. What does that tell you about how he understood these, like, power dynamics and the kind of influence he was maybe looking for?
I feel like he wanted to just like slip into that level of influence, use it for his own benefit, you know?
Exactly. He wasn't trying to blend in. He was trying to stand out, command attention, get that respect. And he knew that a name like that carried a lot of weight.
Yeah, a lot of weight.
A lot of weight.
And he didn't just talk the talk, he really went all in on the lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
Fake diplomatic license plates, phony security badges, a penthouse on Fisher Island labeled Sultan. We're talking Ferraris, Rolls Royces.
The whole 9 yards.
The whole 9 yards, yeah.
Yeah.
And, of course, no con artist these days is complete without a carefully curated Instagram feed.
You gotta have the Instagram.
Gotta have it, right? Showing off, supposedly, this lavish lifestyle.
All those brands he surrounded himself with, Ferrari, Rolex, Louis Vuitton. What kind of message was he trying to project with that? How do you think that helped build up this persona of his?
It was all about creating this illusion of, like, wealth and exclusivity. Like, he belonged to this elite world that most people can only dream of.
Right. He was a master at manipulating how people saw him.
Right.
He understood that in a world that's so obsessed with status, having those symbols, having that stuff, it could make people believe almost anything.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And just to, like, really complete this whole picture, he hired bodyguards with fake diplomatic security service badges.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this wasn't just some small-time operation. He was fully committed to this charade.
Speaking of audacious, he even got American Express to give him a platinum card.
Oh.
With a $200 million credit limit.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. $200 million.
That's unbelievable.
I know. It's insane.
I mean, it's just crazy how he was able to keep this going for so long.
Right.
You'd think somebody somewhere along the line would have figured it out.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings us to another interesting thing about his past, right? Before the whole Saudi prince thing, he'd already been arrested like 11 times.
11 times.
11 times.
That's not just like a couple of slip-ups. That sounds like a whole pattern of behavior right there.
Yeah, it definitely suggests a pattern. And we're not talking about like little things either. I mean, these were pretty complex schemes, impersonating people, you know, figures of authority, running up huge bills.
Yes.
Saying he was going to pay from accounts that didn't exist.
Oh, wow.
So it all kind of shows that he was really committed to deception, like for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, it couldn't last forever.
No.
In 2019, he finally gets sentenced to 18 and a half years.
Wow.
Charges included impersonating a diplomat, identity theft, and wire fraud.
And the cost of all this wasn't just measured in prison time. This guy, he conned people out of something like $8 million.
$8 million.
Yeah. And a lot of those investors, they ended up basically ruined.
Yeah, that's the part that's really hard to swallow.
Right.
Behind all this fancy stuff, all this, elaborate lifestyle, there were real
Oh,
victims,
yeah.
real people whose lives were messed up because of his lies.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that these stories of con artists can be pretty fascinating. But, there are always consequences.
For sure.
And those consequences, they usually affect innocent people, too.
Yeah. But, it's not all bad news. They are still working to get that money back to try to help those victims out.
Yeah.
Recently, $600,000 was recovered from an account overseas,
Oh, wow.
and it was returned to some of the people that he defrauded.
Good.
So that's at least a step in the right direction.
It is. It shows that even years later, there's still some effort being made to, to hold him accountable, to get some justice for those victims.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've looked at his whole rise to royalty, the ins and outs of his cons. We've looked at the damage that he caused. Where does all that leave us?
Right.
I mean, was this guy a criminal mastermind? Was he, a victim of circumstance, or was he maybe a little bit of both?
It's tough, right? There isn't an easy answer here. On the one hand, he was obviously good at what he did, manipulative, obviously driven by greed, willing to do pretty much anything to get what he wanted.
Yeah. But was it all about the money?
That's a good question.
Could there have been like a deeper reason, some psychological thing driving him to create these crazy, elaborate schemes?
That's a really interesting point. Some experts think that his tough childhood might have played a role here. I mean, we know he was an orphan in Bogota,
Right.
lived on the streets with his brother before being adopted. His lawyer even said that his early years were all about, just like foraging for food, just trying to take care of his brother.
Wow.
I mean, that is a world away from the luxury that he later pretended to have.
It is. It's like polar opposites almost.
Right.
It does make you think like maybe this whole Prince act, maybe it was a way to kind of like compensate for what he didn't have early on,
Yeah.
to create this life that he never had.
It's possible maybe he was trying to fill some kind of void, to try to get the love and attention and acceptance that he missed out on when he was younger.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes you think. Right. So it's not just a story about greed.
Right.
It's about the complications, the nuances of human behavior,
Yeah.
and how our experiences shape who we become.
Right. And how our past can influence the choices we make, even if those choices lead us down a bad path.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
There are all these different perspectives from people who knew him.
Yeah.
Some people saw just a cold-hearted criminal.
Right.
And then others, like a designer who was friends with him, they saw someone who just really wanted connection.
Yeah.
Someone who wanted to be loved.
Maybe maybe it was just kind of like a mask
Right.
for, a really insecure person.
Right. He was playing a part, trying to hide all his insecurities.
Yeah. I mean, it really makes you think, what was driving him? Was it a need for, validation? Was he just trying to prove himself to everyone else?
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating puzzle.
It is.
It's almost like a Shakespearean tragedy,
Right.
This guy, he could have done great things,
Mm-hmm.
but, he went down the wrong road.
Absolutely. It reminds us that even the most talented people can be tempted. They
Yeah.
can get seduced by the wrong things.
Right.
And that line between wanting something good and wanting something bad, it can be so thin.
It can be really, really thin.
Hmm.
So what do we learn from all this? What should we keep in mind when we meet someone who seems maybe a little too good to be true?
Gignac's story, I think, it really highlights how powerful appearances are and how persuasive some people can be. It's like a warning. Don't just blindly trust people who look successful or seem wealthy, especially in today's world.
Right?
I mean, social media makes it so easy for people to just, create this whole fake image of themselves.
Totally. So be skeptical, ask questions.
Yeah.
Don't just take things at face value.
Exactly. Don't be swayed by charm or promises that just seem too good to be true.
Right.
Gignac's case is a perfect example of how easily we can get sucked in by a good story, even if that story is totally made up.
So in the end, grifter or gifted,
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's up to each person to decide.
What's clear, though, is that his story is a lot more than just your typical con man tale. It's about all of us. It's about what we want, our fascination with wealth and power.
Right.
And it's about how vulnerable we can be to people who know how to use those desires against us.
It's interesting. This whole thing, it really makes you think about how much we love stories about royalty,
Yeah, it's true.
about people who seem to have these perfect, charmed lives.
It's like we want to be connected to something bigger than ourselves. you know?
Right.
To feel like we're part of some special exclusive world.
Exactly.
And he totally knew how to use that.
He did. I mean, we eat up anything about royals, weddings, scandals, documentaries, you name it.
Right.
So it makes sense that someone like Gignac playing the part of a prince, he was able to get people's attention, get their trust so easily.
Yeah. It's all about what we want, what we hope for.
Right.
We tend to admire people who seem to have reached that level of success and status that we all crave, you know? And sometimes we kind of ignore those warning signs or those things that don't quite add up.
Yeah.
Just because we want a little taste of that world.
It's like that whole fake it till you make it thing.
Exactly.
But Gignac took that to a whole other level.
He did.
But what if he had used his skills, his talents for something good?
Right.
Could someone with his charisma, with his way with words, could he have been successful without all the lies, without the deception?
It's an interesting thought.
It is.
What if he had put all that energy into a real business, you know?
Right.
Used his smooth talking for sales or marketing.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe he could have built something real instead of this house of cards that all came crashing down.
It's almost kind of sad.
It is.
All that potential wasted.
Yeah.
All those chances missed.
Because of the choices he made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess it just goes to show you that intelligence and talent, you can use them for good.
Yeah.
Or you can use them for bad. Gignac's story, I think it's a really powerful example of what can happen when ambition gets twisted, you know, when it gets mixed up with this need to prove yourself and this lack of caring about other people.
Well said.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the strange world of Anthony Gignac.
The man who built his whole life on a lie.
We looked at his crazy schemes, the psychology behind it all, and the real harm that he caused.
It's a story that makes you think about truth and perception.
Yeah.
And that blurry line between ambition and deception.
For sure. So what do you think? What are your takeaways from all this? What's going to stick with you after this episode is over?
Yeah.
Let us know on social media. We really want to hear your thoughts.
And remember, next time you meet someone who seems a little too perfect, a little too good to be true, take a moment.
Yeah.
Ask some questions.
Trust your gut.
Don't be afraid to look a little closer.
That's right. Until next time, stay curious and keep those minds working.